Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello all and welcome back to Basics of Working Drawing. Today we will be looking at introduction of the building construction drawings, and in addition to that, dossier as a complete compendium of the working drawings. What all things are to be there to make a complete sheet or call a sheet complete is what we will be looking at today. Right. So just to give you a recap of the previous discussions that we had, which also had partly covered this particular topic to an extent, is that we looked at the sizes of the sheet, how big the sheet layout should be or how should be the page sizes. We looked at that, and in which kind of sheet or what kind of sheet, what are the drawings that usually go in them, right. So that's what we looked at. Next is the scale. For each of these sheets which we talked about, each of these will have different scales of drawings, where in we say if there are enlarged drawings which are to be scaled up, they will be represented in 50:1, 20:1, 5:1, so and so forth, right. If we are representing something in full scale, we will be representing it in 1:1 scale, right. If we are reducing the scale, if we are making something smaller in proportion, we will be scaling it down from 1:50 to 1:100 to 1:500, so and so forth. Usually we stop around 1:500, not beyond that, right. Moving on forward, we did see right, this doesn't go away. Right. Moving on forward, we looked at the dimensioning of the different ways of dimensioning these particular drawings. So when we looked at a building footprint, we did see that there are different types of different ways of dimensioning the sides of the building. If we have a hunch on the side, if we have a difference of layout, right, compared to this side to this side, right, on the left and the right we have different types of the facade, right. So on the right side, if we see, it's a continuous facade. On the left side we have a truncated facade. So here we can also do a check by dimensioning that the drawing is correctly drawn and it is not changing from the 12 feet marker, right. So here we are taking an example of a building where we have a 12 feet side on one end and another side also has truncation of 7 feet and 5 feet. Both added together make 12 feet. So that is a correct way of representation. The same thing is also there in another side, another example where on the top you see a continuous side of the building where you have 15 feet of distance, and on the other side you have a cutout where you have 9 feet of area where the building does not exist, but the extension of that building comes out, which is about 6 feet in width, right. Putting together 9 and 6, we have 15 feet. So these are like checks which are offered by dimensioning the drawings. All right. Next, we also looked at different types of lines which we have. So we have dimension line, center line, object line, section line, and the break line which are there. So we did discuss about these different types of lines which are there, right, and what do they represent in a particular set of drawing when we are doing that, right. And lastly, we looked at the components of sheet. So in a sheet, what all things are there? So we have a note area, we have the border of that particular sheet which we do, then we have a legend, right, we have schedule of doors and windows, etc. So these can be different types of schedules which we have, right, along with the legend which have representative diagrams of all of the things which will be there inside the drawing, which will represent certain fixtures or certain components or elements of that particular building. All of these are being listed out in this particular legend. Along with that, the schedule also represents the type, the sizes, the finish, the make of these particular components or elements that we will be talking about in the legends, right. In this particular lecture we will detail it out further, we will study more about this, right. Then you have a quite a large blank area which is the main part of the drawing where you will actually put your drawing, right. So that's the drawing area, and lastly it is the title block. So your title block has all the details of your firm, your client, your person who has drawn this drawing, how many number of revisions have happened, so on and so forth, right. So within this sheet what all do we have? Within the title block we have this is just an example coming from a company called Entity Architects, which is the architectural firm. They have provided us courteously this particular template for a representation in this particular lecture, right. So when we are looking at the title block, what all do we see? These title blocks usually change with the company preferences. So some companies may put in the architect's office at the bottom, some company may put it right on the top, like in this case, or things shuffle on top of each other, right. But it is a linear tabulation, so more or less it remains almost in the same place, right, almost in the same tabular format, right. So what do we have in this requirement, like what are the basic requirements in a title block? We need to have the structural consultant's name, we need to have the architect's office name and details, we need to have the client's name for whom these drawings are being drawn, for whose building these drawings are being compiled together. Then we have the revision table on number of revisions that have happened for these particular sheet, right. For this one particular sheet, number of revisions that have happened, on which date did it happen, and what is the annex sheet that has been made, the amendment which has been done to that drawing, where does it go, like what is the other drawing wherein you have this particular detail represented. Then you have date of issue of drawing, right. So the main date of issue of drawing, when the drawing has been printed out and it has been signed, that is the date that will go there, right. So on that date this drawing is probably also sent to the site, right, where the consultant and the people who are doing the execution will also take a look at this drawing, right. So the next one is the scale of the drawing. This is quite important. So if you are putting down a plan on that sheet, so the drawing detail and the number and the scale needs to be there. So scale is a very important factor which shows at what scale is that particular thing drawn. If you are doing a detail, you have to put that scale right there and then, right. Then you have the drawing number, and this particular sheet, what number is it of the total compendium that we have, and there are different specifications about how we write the drawing number, which we will talk about it later. And then lastly we have the orientation, which is basically the north sign. So where is the north in that particular layout that you have to identify and that you have to place it in the drawing. We need to be a bit careful that these north signs are often mistakenly represented in some drawings which do not require a north sign, something like an elevation drawing. Probably you don't require a north sign in an elevation drawing because it is vertical, right. So it's difficult to represent the north in a vertical layout, right. So these are certain things which one should be very careful about. Next we talked about the details and the titles of the drawings when we have. So in a drawing title we usually don't use conjunctions, right. So conjunctions meaning or, for, these are the things that we don't use, right. That's rule number 1. So something like if you are doing a layout of lintels on the first floor of a building, and this is an example. So you won't say like if you say lintel layout for first floor, that is not acceptable, right. The acceptable version of the same thing is first floor lintel layout. So that is what is to be written on the drawing sheet, that is the drawing title. Next, there are no abbreviations which are to be used in the whole drawing title. Only if a certain thing has a abbreviation and in the form of a trademarked name, right. So for example, if someone has given the name of their office as OOK, office of someone, office of Karan, that's an example, right. So OOK is an abbreviation which may be used only if OOK is a registered entity and is being has approached this architect to do the drawing for them, right. So only then you will put that as a title in the name, else you will put the whole name instead of an abbreviation, you will write office of Karan, right, something in that format, right. So that's something to be remembered. Next is drawing numbering, the way we number the drawings. I need to erase this. The way we number the drawings, right, that's important, because when we are numbering the drawings, there are different sets of drawings which will be there, right. And if someone looks at it at a first glance, they may mistaken it for take it for a different type of drawing altogether, right. For example, if there is an architectural drawing which is doing furniture details, someone may mistakenly understand it as an interior design drawing, right. So for that purpose, usually there is a convention which is being followed, wherein you mark out the type of drawing that it is, right, meaning that whether it is an architectural drawing or the structural drawing or plumbing drawing or electrical drawing or interior drawing. So what type of drawing it is, that is to be mentioned, right, that's number one. Second is you mention the type of sheet it is, right. So what type of sheet is it? Is it a plan sheet, is it a section sheet, or is it an elevation sheet? That you represent in the second slot of this particular drawing numbering. And then the number of the sheets that are there, right. So in this case, if I try to identify or read through this particular drawing numbering system, then I would say, or this being this gets elaborated at, it is an architectural drawing which has a plan on it, and this is the fifth drawing of a plan, right. So there are 5 different plans, at least 5 different plans, of which the fifth plan is represented on the sheet which is titled as, which is numbered as this, okay. So that's the whole idea, right. Moving on forward. So within the drawing area, as we saw in the components of the drawing, you have a drawing area. So within the drawing area, the largest drawing that we have, or the drawing at the highest scale that one would have, is the site plan, right. So in the site plan, what do we do? In the site plan, we show the building, where it is placed, right, the orientation of the building, the orientation of the site, the dimensions of the building, the approach road, how we are approaching to the main building from the exterior approach road, how we are going to plan out the interior road, all of those things are to be shown in here, right. In addition to that, we need to place the natural elements which we are not going to harm, something like old trees if they are located there, something like old water bodies which we are going to retain, or we are adding new trees and adding new water bodies inside that particular site of yours, then in that case we also need to represent those in the site plan. Now whether to retain them, whether to modify them, whether to amend them or change them in shape, form or scale, all of that is at the discretion of the client and the architect. As per whatever they decide, that is what is being represented in the drawing also, right. But for each of the amendment, each of the change that will be there, there will be a separate layered drawing. That is something an architect needs to be sure of, right, so that it can be communicated well on the site. So people who are involved in execution of these particular layouts or these particular elements of that particular building or area, people will be much careful about, and people will be informed with the help of that particular drawing, right. So what all things do we see are the typical kind of information that is found in a site plan is as follows. You have the location of and the location of the proposed as well as the existing buildings, right. So if there are some existing buildings, say for example in this particular case you see the blue highlighted building is probably one which is existing, and you are going to do another building, an additional building which will be a add-on in this particular site. So this is an example, right. So in this case you will represent both the new building as well as the existing building which are there, right. Next you have to put in the topography of the site. where is the contour, how does it look, what are the situation, what are the levels of these different contours, all of that is to be mentioned. Then later on you can also do a hatching pattern, as we talked about the common hatches, or we will also discuss the common hatches in the subsequent class, is that the hatching pattern can also be mentioned in the legend that this particular building is to be demolished or this particular structure is to be demolished. So, all of this information can be communicated through different hatching patterns, right. So, that information can be put down there. Next is the type of approaches that a particular site will have, the kind of footpaths it will have, the roads, the layout of the roads, the paved areas, the non-paved areas, the places where you will have landscaping elements, the places where you will have stepping stones, maybe there is water flowing and you are stepping on top of different stones to create a new interesting pathway within the site. So, all of these are to be represented and mentioned with their location and the scale on the site plan, right. Next, if a particular site has some amount of trees which are already there, so the number of trees which are there, the type of trees which are there can be maintained in a schedule, but at the same time the trees which are to be retained should definitely be mentioned and drawn on the site plan, right. Moving forward, we also need to demarcate and identify the places where there will be some sort of fence or a fencing which will be put in place all around the site or within the site, or if there are some at some locations you want to have a fence, but at other locations you want to have a wall, or all of it, all the boundary of your particular site will have walls. So, all of these differences need to be put in the drawing, right, and each of them will have different kinds of representations. Followed up by that, the gates or the entrances of the particular site, also different entrances which you will have apart from the building entrance, all the different entrances that you will have in different places put on the site, all of these need to be represented in the site plan. Next, the orientation of the site becomes very important. Now, there are two ways to do this. One is same as this particular example, that you mark the north up on the north and then you orient the site accordingly. This can be done in different CAD softwares, computer aided drawing softwares. So, you can orient the site accordingly according to the north. Another way to do this is you keep the site as manageable. So, if your site is rectangular and the north points in a certain way, then turning the site would appear much abrupt. Also, it would not give you ample amount of space within the site layout, right. So, usually it depends on what kind of is the shape, what kind of shape is the site in. Based on that, you orient the north of this particular layout or particular site plan, right. Next is your access roads. Your access road which is outside the site is to be mentioned. On one side of the site, usually in most of the cases, on one side of the site you will get an approach road, right, or an access road through which you create a site entrance, right. So, that is to be represented at complete scale, right, and it may be truncated on the two ends to the extents of your site, like done in this fashion, where the road is completed here, road ends here. So, you might introduce break lines like this on the two ends and you represent the complete access road. And lastly, you need to put in all the side dimensions on at least all the 4 or 5 sides if your site is a 5-sided site. So, like in this case you have a bit of a truncation on the end. So, all of these dimensions are to be mentioned, right, which are mentioned in this particular example, right. So, that way all of the information needs to be there, right. Okay. Moving on forward. So, when we have a floor plan, so coming from the site plan where we have individual buildings inside. So, coming from the site plan, if you have a building inside, each of the building is to be represented with a floor plan as well, right. So, in the floor plan case, right, when we go to the floor plan, each of the floor plan is taken up as a horizontal section, right, a horizontal section taken at eye level, right. The eye level theoretically is considered as 4 feet, right. So whatever that will get cut at a 4 feet level of an actual building, that is to be represented in the plan format from top. If you are looking at a particular building from the top and you are cutting it at a 4 feet level from the ground, then everything that will be seen is to be represented in that particular drawing, right. So that's what a floor plan contains. So it contains all the required information needed for construction, and that serves as the basis for other drawings, right. So the orientation of other drawings can also be done through the main floor plan, right. It shows the layout of the room, the placements of the door and windows, the furniture placement, the electrical layout placement, the electrical appliances and fixtures placement, the plumbing layout and plumbing points and placement. Then lastly, floor finishes and all the other things which can be included in this. So we can have HVAC, we can have finishing layout, we can have the types of finishes you want to give on the sides of the wall, on the flooring. All of these things can be put in this particular layout, right. So what all do we have in a floor plan? If we take it up as a checklist, we will have all the walls and partitions to be mentioned. So all the partitions which can be moved or which are there, which will be permanent partitions inside or temporary partitions inside, they are to be put in the drawing, right. All levels and all level differences. So in case like this, if you have an approach at which you have a gate, so you will have 3 steps. You are coming at the plinth level, so this level and this level and this level is to be mentioned. So you will be coming from one level to the other and then you will be going inside, right. So all of this is to be mentioned, right. Moving forward, you will have the column layouts and the sizes of the column, right. So you will also have a schedule of columns where you will be mentioning about all the columns which are there. So all the structural elements are to be put in a schedule, right. Next you will have all the internal and external dimensions of this particular floor, where you will be showing rooms and the different layouts of different elements of the rooms, right. Next you will have room names. So whether there is a kitchen, whether there is a living room, there is a drying area or a toilet or a bathroom and things like that. So all the rooms are to be named and to be mentioned in that particular drawing. Then you will also have your doors and windows positions and the naming. So we will talk about naming in detail in the subsequent slides when we discuss schedules. So these are to be mentioned in the drawing, right. So next you will have furniture layout if at all needed. Usually when we do interior design, that is the time you introduce a furniture layout, but in most cases you do not have a furniture layout until and unless the furniture is cast in situ, meaning that you are going to do furniture which can't be moved, right. It is not of wood, it can't be lifted from one place and placed in another place. So all of these kind of furnitures which will be permanent in nature will be represented here. And lastly, any opening that is going to be above the plan level should also be mentioned in dotted line. So anything that is sort of an overhang, say you are going to have a floor level which will be at this level and you are going to show a plan till this point and then something comes out, right, there is a protrusion which is coming out on top of it. So that is to be mentioned in dotted lines. Some of the things like overhangs, some of the things like chhajjas, some of the things like cantilevered balconies. So these are to be mentioned in dotted lines in the lower floor plan, right. So that's about the floor plan. Then we have the elevation. So in elevations we see your exterior material finishes. So it is basically a perpendicular view of how a particular side of a building will look like. So there you have to mention the exterior material and finishes, what kind of material will be here. You need to mention the horizontal and vertical dimensions of the building. You also need to locate the windows, the wall openings like the gates, like the windows here, like the doors here, the shutter doors here and things like that, right. So all of these things are to be mentioned. We will provide any information about any exterior plumbing which will be there. So that is also to be included here. Furthermore, you need to show the window shades, the other things which are to be which will be projected outside the building, such as the chajja which you see here, or covering which you will have probably here, is to be mentioned and identified or isolated and annotated accordingly, right. Then furthermore, the position of the outdoor AC units, if required, may also be positioned, may also be highlighted in a dotted line, right. And lastly, you have the location of the plastered grooves. This can be done in a pop out detail, that you will be having a groove, say, of this size at that particular point, so that might also be highlighted there. Furthermore, you will have any kind of handrail, or say in this kind of a thing, in a balcony you have a railing here which changes again on the lower floor, which changes again here. So all of these different typical details you can mention and highlight. Then in specification part, you can mention which kind of color paint or texture or cladding you will be using on the different surfaces on this elevation. So all of these things are to be mentioned within this particular elevation, right. So this is a typical elevation wherein you see all the details, all the floor levels and heights which are being mentioned here, right. The schedule of windows which are here, so typical different types of windows which are being used. If we see 1, 2, 3, 4, no, that's the same thing, the 1, 2, 3 types of windows at least that you get to see. So these things are mentioned in here, right. So these are the typical windows. Then you have the openings in the wall which you have, say, here. So probably this is an external door and this is a sliding window come door. So these things are also described in different dimensions with the schedule, right. So all of these details are to be mentioned along with the elevation sheet. So going further in the section, so in section what we do is we basically cut through a place in the building block, and we expose or we describe the interior elevation of the room or staircase or a different part which we will be talking about, which we want to talk about, the foundation type which that particular place has, the beam and column sizes, the ceiling finishes and false ceiling details, if any. False ceiling details are often dedicated particularly to interior design, but it is just being mentioned here. Next will be the roof type and the size of the roof, the floor to floor heights, which is this distance will also be mentioned, the level difference between rooms. So if there are some steps or staircase between two rooms, so the level is also mentioned there. The door, windows and partitions, if there are any within this particular building which you are doing, when you draw a section, you also have to mention that. You have to mention the sill height and the lintel heights, which can be marked with dimension lines, and the location of the electrical and plumbing points in the walls of different rooms and sizes, right. So all of these are to be taken care of in the section drawing when we are doing a section. So this is a typical section of side section and a section through a staircase. So here you see the staircase, the doors, the mumpty on the top, or the water tank on the top, right, the lift mumpty on the top, the lift room, the lift core is also mentioned here. So this is where the lift core is. So all of these things are available or are required to be made available with all descriptions within the sectional drawing. So here as well you see the interior being exposed in a longitudinal section. So this typically is section RR, which is passing through the building longitudinally, and this is section PP, which expose your staircase in a sectional view, right. So these are again to be mentioned in a section template, right. Lastly, or as we move to the terminal part of the presentation, there are certain commonly used terminologies which one needs to be very well familiar with. So you have access, you have bonds, you have the coping, you have excavation, you have facade, footing, gradation and joinery. So access is where the building or a line along which an object will rotate. A bond is basically an arrangement with which the masonry is connected. Coping is a cap or the top of a particular masonry wall. Excavation, as I talked about the example of the swimming pool in a building, so that will be digging out earth or digging out soil out of a particular area in a land plot for construction of certain things. That is excavation. Next is your facade. So any front face or any side face or facade of a building, elevation of a building is basically the facade. The footing of the building is where the large load of the building is being transferred, so that is largely within the soil in most cases, so the footing will go in there. And the grading, so where you are processing to reshape the land for landscape, particularly in large plots, so that is where you require to have grading in the site. And next would be joinery, or lastly would be joinery, where you are talking about wood joints or different types of typical structural joints. For example, if you have a sloping roof, you will have a lot of woodwork in there in the trusses and trellises of the wood, right. So next we have the lintel, masonry, nosing, parapet, plot, ramp, sill and span. So these are understood. I'm sure you have seen this in building construction as well. So lintel is typically on top of horizontal member on top of a window. We have the masonry, the type of material we will be using for making our walls and constructing our walls. So it will be either brick, stone or concrete or other materials which you want to use. So that will fall under masonry. The nosing is basically the tip of your staircase tread. The parapet is a low wall or a railing on the terrace, right. A plot is a piece of land. A ramp is basically a slope pathway for wheelchairs or vehicles. So all of these terminologies are to be mentioned in capital wherever you are describing a certain feature in a drawing, right. So next is sill, a horizontal member below the window or a door, and span is the horizontal distance between the beams, joists or trusses, right. So these are the typical terminologies which we use, right. Now there are some common symbols as well. North symbol or a north point symbol becomes extremely important. The levels which we describe for talking about the different level differences between the floors are to be included here. The level line typically comes in a elevation drawing or a section drawing, where you represent the level of a particular floor or a level of a particular feature coming out of the building. Then there is a elevation pointing feature as well, or elevation indicator. So this indicates from which side you will be looking at the particular plan or the particular building to draw out the elevation. So typically here is where you write the elevation number and the sheet in which it has been represented, right. Similarly, here you have a sectional line. Now typically this comes in a plan drawing. This is where the section line will cut the building. So for example, if you have a building block like this is where it will cut the building, and then you will draw the section which will be looking in this direction, right. So you will draw the building for this particular part, draw the sectional elevation for this particular part. So those are the common symbol. Coming to the common hatches, right. Commonly we use these 9 types of hatches, right. We use these 9 types of hatches which represent different materials which are there in different floor plans that we have. Say if we look at the one on the top, steel, right. So you would have steel finish in some place, right. For example, you have steel finish in a section in a kitchen, right. So you are putting a in situ platform which is made of steel, right. So that is to be represented in this format, right. So whenever you are representing steel, you will represent it in that format. Most commonly used hatch is the brick wall hatch, wherein wherever you have a brick wall and whenever it is visible in a plan or a section and it gets cut, then you will have the double line 45-degree angled double line hatch as a brick wall, representing a brick wall. Next, another commonly used hatch is the concrete. So whenever you have a concrete wall which is cast in situ, a column which is being cut, so all of these things are mentioned are represented by a concrete hatch which looks like this, right. Then you have tiling, right. So, in tiling, if you are doing it in the floor plan, it is okay, you can represent it in the dimensions of the tiles that will be used. If you are representing a plan of a toilet, a plan of a bathroom, or even for that matter plan of a living room or a kitchen where you have tiles. So, this is the way to represent it. Then as we go to the exterior, things start becoming interesting, wherein you have gravel. If at all you have a landscaped area or an approach road which will be done in gravel. So, that is where you use this kind of an hatch. Places where you are not doing any kind of finish and you will be using the natural earth which is available on the site as a way to approach the particular building which you have working on, then you use a earth hatch. Second, an earth hatch is also used in an elevation and a section, right. For example, if you have a building in a section, then the earth hatch will be used here, right, to show that this particular position is where the ground line is and below that it is underground, right. So, this is how it is used, right, in case of an elevation as well as a section, wherein you will be showing the interiors of a building, right, the sectional elevations as well, right. So, this becomes important in this kind of a case. Next, sand. So, in case of sand, in most cases this is used as the elevation part. So, wherever you are representing a treatment, say for example, this part of your building wherein it has a balcony and then you have a wall, and this part of the building in elevation is going to have sand plaster. So, that is where you will use the sand hatch, right. The next one is specific usually to the site plan, wherein you have on ground, wherever you will have on the layout, say you have an island wherein you will be doing a water body, and all along that area, all around that area you will have grass. So, this is where you represent grass, this is how you represent grass. Next one is glass. So, glass is represented by 3 dashed lines, and say imagine you have a window here which is a sliding window, and you will have 2 parts to it, right, 2 panes to it. So, here is where you will represent the glass kind of a representation, right. So, that is all about the common that is all about the common hatches. Next, we move to material specification. Now, in most of the working drawings, material specifications are mentioned at a minimum level. Usually, we also have a document of specifications of the finishes that will be applied on a particular finished building or a finished surface, right. So, for that you have a document of specifications. So, in the drawing, wherever you are mentioning the schedule of the different elements of that particular building, that is where you also need to put in some amount of information about the material specification of the elements that you are talking about, right. So, what does material specification mean? You are going to put in the details of the type, the quality and the standard of material that is to be used in construction of that particular element, right. This is to ensure particularly 3 things. One is the consistency, that it remains consistent throughout that particular layout or that particular building. Next is safety, so that if certain places would probably, say you are designing an area which probably might be prone to fire, so you will require a fireproof door there, right. So, for that particular purpose you need to mention that this is a fireproof door, and that particular door will be mentioned as a different kind of door, right, in that particular specification where you are doing it, right. Next is adherence to design intent. Say for example, you will be doing all the doors in a custom fashion. So, all the doors have different types of designs which you are going to provide in a door and window working drawing sheet, right. All are custom designed, right. So, to maintain that all of the different doors which will be there in that particular building will have only the door which you have designed, there you have to stick to the design intent of your particular way of drawing, right. So, that is something which is to be represented in this particular table or schedule, which we will be talking about, right, in detail. So, what are the key elements which are to be put in the table? So, firstly is the type of material. So, we need to have a detailed description of the material, like if it will be concrete, it will be brick, it will be a steel kind of component, or it will be aluminum component. So, what is the type of material that will be used in this particular building, right. So, that is to be that is to be mentioned in the table, right. Next, the quality standard. So, what type of standard are we going to follow? The grades, the IS codes, Indian standard codes, right. So, all of these things are to be mentioned to create a specific look and order of that particular building or the component that we are talking about, right. So, the grade and class of the material according to the relevant standards which we have, that is to be mentioned. Next, the source of material. In a lot of cases, architects often have their own vendors, or meaning that they are linked with some vendors or they are linked with some manufacturers to create a different kind of style or create a different kind of appearance which is specific to that architectural firm. In order to maintain that visual aid or that visual flavor of an architect's style, sometimes they often just remain connected to a simple set of suppliers or manufacturers. So, if that is the case, then you also need to mention the type of material which is there, the type of manufacturer that you would like to use, or the type of supplier or who will be supplying that particular appliance or component, that specific appliance or component in your design for completion of your design. And lastly, sometimes if the location of this particular building is far away from the architect's office, then sometimes architects also recommend some of the tests which are to be undertaken to check the quality of the material. Say for example, you are going to do a sand plaster on top of your building, right. The exterior wall you are going to have a sand plaster. So, when you are plastering the building, then what happens is sometimes taking an example, sometimes there is probably a flood that has happened and your soil supply, your sand supply is disrupted, right. So, sand is not coming to your site. So, suddenly the vendor or the contractor who is on the site executing the plastering work runs out of soil, runs out of the sand which is to be used, and he requires a different kind of soil which is being brought. So, in that particular case, you will have to, as an architect, you will have to mention a specific test so that it complies with the earlier soil. It is similar or closest to the earlier soil and it can be used in your case and your purpose. If it is not there, then the ultimate finish, the look, the appearance will be different and the project might not be appreciated as much. So, these are some of the cautionary notes which are mentioned in working drawings sometimes, right, given that there are changes which are there, right. So, moving on forward, let us look at these individual schedules that we have. So, we have we definitely have a schedule of doors and windows. This schedule usually gives the comprehensive list of doors and windows that are in the building, what are their sizes, what are their types and their locations, right. So, these are to be mentioned in a table format. We will give you an example of this in the subsequent slides. And what are the key elements that are mentioned here? That is something that is important, right. So, we often mark the doors and windows with a unique ID, right. It is marked as D1, D2, D3, D4, so on and so forth, right. So, that is to be mentioned. What is that unique identifier and for the each door and window that is there in this building, right. Then the sizes and the dimensions of this particular window or door that you will be talking about. Say you are talking about D1, you will mention the dimensions of that door and you will mention the width, height and thickness of the door, which is important, right. Also, you also need to mention the type of the door that it will be, whether it is a wooden door, it is an aluminum door or aluminum window or a PVC door at a toilet or at a bathroom entrance. So, all of that is to be mentioned. Next goes the mechanism, whether it will be a sliding window, a sliding door or it will be a a fixed door or it will be a swinging door. So, all of that is to be mentioned here. Next is the location. So, wherever you are creating these unique IDs, they are to be placed in the drawing and they are to be explained in the schedule, right. So, the floor number, the room number and where the door is installed or where the window is installed, that is to be mentioned in the drawing. So, let us take an example, right. So, to elaborate or explain these in detail, we will have an example, right. So, here in this kind of a layout, which is a typical floor plan of a residential apartment, we have seen this in the previous lecture as well. So, in a residential apartment, you have this kind of a layout, right. So, let us concentrate on these three locations. One is a blown up area of a bedroom, and 2 and 3 are the schedules, right. So, what does it look like? When we look at 1, this is the blown up area of a bedroom, right. So, you see all the components which are there in the bedroom, all the nomenclature or all the annotation also you see, right. So, in schedule, when we look at the schedule, we have different types of doors which are marked. So, there is D, D1, D2, D3, all of these have different dimension and all of these also have more or less different kind of description or different type of door is there according to the size and the description which is there. Maybe the material is the same, that is not being mentioned here, right. So, all we have is wooden that is mentioned, but in D2 we do not have wooden mentioned, we just have it as flush door. Now, in this layout, in this blown up area, we see D1 and D2, right, two types of door we see, right. So, that is one thing to be mentioned. Now, coming to the window, in this whole layout we see only one type of window, which is W1, right. W1 is mentioned here, D1 and D2 is mentioned here, right. So, in the window layout as well, in the window schedule as well, we have W1, W1, W2, W3, W4, W5, so on and so forth, and their dimensions, whether they are sliding or not, whether they are fixed. If they are fixed, what is the size of the fixed pane, what is the size of the sliding plane, what will be the sill level at which you can keep your hand. So, what will be the sill level till which the window will start from the floor height, all of that is to be mentioned. Also, the type of the window that it will be is to be mentioned. So, when you look at D1, D2, they are being mentioned at position 2 and 3 in the schedule. When you look at W1, which is here, that is mentioned as at serial number 2 in the window schedule. So, this is the way you link the drawing with the schedule. So, this is how you try to communicate to the vendor or communicate to the person who will be executing this particular location, this particular building, what are the types of schedules, what are the types of joineries and doors and windows which are to be used, right. Same way, you have lighting fixture schedule, which talks about lighting fixtures, and the components which are mentioned in there is the fixture type, the fixture, whether it is tube light, pendant light, drop down light or a wash up light or whatever type of light it is, that is to be mentioned. Same way, in the previous example that we talked about, the manufacturer, the make of the fixture is to be mentioned, right, who is manufacturing that, if it is some particular brand that the architect's office follows or has been recommended specifically by the client, that is to be mentioned here. Then the type of bulb or type of lighting appendages that will be used, lighting fixture that will be used in this particular fixture, that is also to be mentioned, whether it will be fluorescent, whether it will be colored, whether it will be LED or it will be a smart light, that is to be mentioned in here, right. And lastly, the material finish, sometimes you have different types of finish which come on top. You have brushed steel, you have carbon steel, you have brass, you have bronze coating on top of it. So, these kind of appearance related finishes are to be mentioned in the lighting fixture schedule as well. Then we have the finishes schedule, right. So, this is also an additional document which goes in with the document of specifications. So, often comes in the purview of the specification domain when we talk about it, right. So, this changes with each and every architect's style of design, right. So here we have the finishing schedule where we have interior finishes, and particularly if we look at the building as a whole, the whole room or whole all of the collection of rooms which makes the complete floor plan needs to have all the finishes which are to be mentioned, right. So here what all do we consider as key elements? We have the room number or unique ID, same as the door and window schedule. We also need to give room IDs or names, and then we have the room names. Then we have the types of finishes that we will have, the material that is to be used, the type of material that will be used, the dimension of tiles if it is tiles at all on the floor, that is to be mentioned. Then we go to wall. So in the wall finish, what type of paint will be used, whether it will be a art wall or whether it will be a simply painted emulsion painted wall. So all of that is to be mentioned. The type of paint is also to be mentioned with colors or the paint scheme which has been agreed upon between the client and the architect, right. Next is the ceiling finish. What type of finish will be there on the ceiling, whether it is a false ceiling with a POP false ceiling, or it is a complete ceiling where you are going to just paint the ceiling and then you will put in your appliances there. Next is lighting fixture schedule. Usually this goes from the architect's office when the architect's office is also doing the interior layout to an extent of that particular building, right. So in the electrical fixture schedule, you have the interior and exterior electrical fixtures, their positions and their make and finishes, same as the previous one. You will have the room ID, you will have the room name, you will have the fixture type, whether it will be a lighting fixture, whether it will be a fan, whether it will be appliance, plug points and all these things which are to be mentioned. Another thing which is I think missing from the slide is your location of the switchboard also needs to be there, right. So location of switchboards also needs to be there, right. So that is something which is to be mentioned here, right. Then make and finish, same as previous, and the material and finish, that is to be mentioned, right. So right. Next is HVAC schedule. Usually when we are doing say a commercial building, we are developing a commercial building or a building which will have centralized air conditioning, right. So in several cases architect's office hires a HVAC consultant. So these schedules and these drawings come from an HVAC consultant, but an architect also needs to understand that and whether the communication is happening well between the client, the architect and the consultant, that can be checked or that can be brought on the same table using such kind of additional schedules which can be put in on a working drawing. So HVAC schedule specifically mentions on what type of an air conditioning will be happening in each of the space of that particular building, right. So here the things that are important or things that will be mentioned in a table is the type of air conditioning, the volume of the room that is there, the manufacturer of the system, the quantity of the equipment which is there, and other information like the volume which is served in that that building, that room, that is to be calculated and mentioned in a table there. So similar to the previous two cases, you will have the room ID and room name. Along with that, you have the volume served, you have the area served, area, the floor area of the room is also to be mentioned. Then you have the specification sheet, which usually the client usually the consultant attach as a separate document, wherein you have all the specifications of the equipment which will be installed in this particular place or this particular room or floor, right. Next you have plumbing schedules. So in plumbing schedule you have all the fittings which are to be used in the wet areas like your toilets, your bathroom, your kitchen, your drying balcony and places such as that, right. So here what all things will you have? You will have the type of fixtures which will be there, type of fittings that will be used, the finish of those fittings and the number of components that you will use, say that quantities will be listed out. So here the same thing turns into a table, same as previous. You will have the room ID, room name, you will have the fitting type, the type of fitting which is to be used, the plumbing fitting, the finish of it, whether it is painted, whether it is coated by some kind of finish or a different kind of art finish is to be used. So, all of these things are to be mentioned. Next is the quantities that are to be used or utilized in that particular place. Next will be the furniture schedule, often used in the case of a interior design, right. So, in furniture schedule you have the type of furniture that is there, the type of paint or coating or finish that this particular furniture will have, and their locations as well. Also, if a particular type of furniture repeats, say you are doing a classroom or you are developing a restaurant, so a particular type of furniture, say the table and the chair, will repeat multiple times, right. So, the quantities are also to be mentioned. So, I hope it was useful for you, and moving on further, we will get into the different parts of the elevation, the plan and the section as we discussed today. So, we will be getting into the details of different features, how we draw them, how we communicate them for effective execution of the thing. So, okay. So, thank you very much for your time.